Okay, so now we're here for our main attraction. It is my honor and my privilege to be presiding with Stanley this morning. So let me introduce you to him, but I know we all love and know him very well. Stanley Edward Maszczak is a multi-passionate speaker, facilitator, and transpersonal coach. He helps individuals and groups articulate their unique gifts as a core gift and signature gift discovery facilitator. He is also a quantum human design specialist, intuitive, and has worked with the Akashic Records and Tarot. His work has been greatly impacted by his own growth journey, navigating fundamentalist religion from a young age and into adulthood, coming out as gay and gender nonconforming, serving in the Army Reserve for almost 22 years, both under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy and after its repeal, and retiring as a Master Sergeant in 2022. Stanley joined the chapel in 2019, and he has served on the board and is currently serves as the chapel's newsletter editor, website, and social media manager, as well as other things that are not listed on this sheet. He does a lot, and we are so thankful for him. Please join me in welcoming Stanley Edward Maszczak to the podium.
Thanks, everybody. It's so good to see everyone here this morning. And hopefully I'll be able to come down and be in person with you again very soon. This morning, there's so much going on in our world today, and I know in my life and in your lives. For those of you that I know and speak to regularly, I'm sure that's the case in pretty much everybody's lives right now. There's a lot going on, and this morning I want to start by reading actually one passage from the Christian scriptures, some of the words that our brother and the great metaphysician Jesus shared, along with some of the deeper meanings I think he was trying to help us understand when he shared this particular parable that I'm going to read this morning. But I want to start off with a little bit of a caveat, because some of the things that I'm going to read in this passage, and Debbie read in my intro some of my background growing up in fundamentalist religion, fundamentalist Christianity. Some of the terms in the passages have very different meanings depending on what group of people is giving you their interpretation of them. So some terms like the kingdom of heaven is part of this passage. When we talk about the kingdom of heaven, for me, my experience as a now metaphysical practitioner and agreeing with the words that Jesus said in Luke 19, the kingdom of heaven is within. The kingdom of heaven is not somewhere up there, out there, or heaven as a place that we go when we die, but the kingdom of heaven is that place inside of us, that place of connection with source, that place of ultimate divinity and connection with all that is. That's the kingdom of heaven that resides within each of us. This is also one of the passages where Jesus talks about things being cast into a furnace of fire where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so I want to put this out up front, that I'm not talking about like this idea that we've heard popularized sometimes of there being this place of eternal torment for certain types of people and hell and all of this. So it's not that translation that I'm going to be, or interpretation I'm going to be talking about. But I do want to invite us, as we think about things like fire, to think about it from partially an elemental standpoint, to think about it from what fire as an element does for us, to think about the fires of transformation, the fires of, some may call purification, fires of life, sometimes where we may be engaging with those challenging experiences in our lives, where some of the old parts of us, the conditioned parts of us, are falling away, or some might describe that as being burned away, and allowing the fullness of who we are as unconditional love and unconditional light to come forth. So thinking about fire as that transformational agent as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but let's read. I'm going to read to you the parable of the wheat and the tares from Matthew chapter 13, and I'm going to read from the New King James Version. It says, another parable he put forth to them, Jesus being he, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among them, among the wheat, and went his way. When the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. Tares are kind of like a weed, which I'll get to in a bit as well. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? And he said to them, an enemy has done this. The servants said to him, do you want us then to go and gather them up, gather up the tares and the weeds? But he said, no, unless while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather together the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. And I'm going to read the next part of the passage where Jesus explains this, but I want to also point out here that some translations use the word weeds for tares instead, which can be helpful, but for me, looking up what a tare actually is, T-A-R-E, is a specific kind of weed that looks almost identical to wheat until it's time to be harvested. So from the time it sprouts up until it's almost time to harvest, the tare, this type of weed, looks exactly like the wheat. So that's why Jesus was saying, don't try to pull the weeds now because they're hard to distinguish from each other and you might pull up the wrong stuff. You might pull up the stuff that you actually want to nourish and develop and to harvest later on. So let them be and let them grow together. And then when we can identify them between each other, then we can pull out what we need to pull out. So later on in that chapter, Jesus sends the multitude away and went into the house. And it says his disciples came to him saying, explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said unto them, he who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are the sons of the wicked one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So I want to go back a little bit, not quite line by line, but a little bit of that to just allow us to open up to the metaphysical understanding of this passage. Because I think, again, with everything going on today, there's a lot of really powerful applicability here for a lot of us, wherever we might be in our spiritual journey. So the first part of Jesus's explanation, he says, the disciples say, explained to us the parables of the field. And he says, he who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. So when we see the Son of Man in Scripture, I invite us to consider, is that the Christ consciousness itself? Is that what Christ represents as Christ consciousness? When we talk about connecting with Christ consciousness and cultivating that within ourselves, cultivating that experience of our own connection with divinity, our own connection with the divine, and inviting that into us. So he who sows the seed is the Christ consciousness within us, the one sowing the wheat, sowing the seeds that we want to be able to harvest, putting all of that good stuff into us that we want to be able to cultivate and develop is that Christ consciousness. So whenever we engage in meditation or connection with source or in energetic healing or other work that connects us with our own divinity, we're cultivating and partnering with even more consciously that Christ consciousness that's constantly working within us to plant those seeds for what we want to grow in our lives. He goes on to say, the field is the world. The good seeds are the son of the kingdom. The field is the world. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom. So the good seeds that are being planted. And if we understand the kingdom as our inner state of oneness, unity, and divinity, our wholeness, where unconditional love is that king in that idea of kingdom, that takes on a different meaning for us, right? Because the things that the king is planting, the things that place is planting are those good seeds in us. right? And he says, but the tares, those specific kinds of weeds that look like wheat, look also like the good things on the surface sometimes, are the sons of the wicked one. So just a little bit of history. If you go back farther, like before Jesus's time, when he was in kind of Jewish history, there was this predominant view of monotheism, of oneness. There was not good and evil. There was this predominantly this idea that God is one, and from God springs everything, including what people would call quote unquote evil, because some of the quote unquote evil stuff that they would see at that time would be those things that would help them differentiate and grow into more close resemblances of God and unity and oneness. So up until about the time of Jesus, there wasn't this idea that we see here in terms of good and evil. And when that started to come in, it was because a lot of the influences from the Hellenistic society, culture, and some other external cultures were coming in and bringing in these ideas of duality. And Jesus was part of that. So he's the one who kind of starts to introduce this idea of good and evil. So just kind of historically, I think it's important to understand where that kind of comes from and that it wasn't always that way, right? So lots of different ways to approach this. But he says, so when we think about the kingdom being that Christ consciousness aspect inside of us, instead of like this literal kingdom or this place, it's this consciousness aspect inside of us, then the wicked one would then become that person or any, not that person, but those ideas and any things that are not that. So it's this idea of anything that is not shining that light, anything that is not being that unconditional love, any thoughts, ideas, actions, behaviors that are not producing that unconditional love in space where all people are valued and appreciated and honored and receive the same dignity and respect as everyone else as equal, co-equal divine expressions of God. So I invite us to think about the wicked one or the wickedness as anything that is not that. So he goes on to say the enemy who sowed them is the devil. Again, that personification in that devil form, the personification of all that is not good, all that is not love, all that is not wholeness, all that is not alignment with the truth of all of our divinity, in all the ways that comes in, thoughts, actions, influences. And he goes on to say the harvest is the end of the age and the reapers are the angels. I think we all, for the most part here, know and appreciate angels and what they do and how they support us. But he says the harvest is the end of the age. And some folks interpret this as, you know, the end of the world, the end times and all of this, and still looking forward to that end of the age period. But I invite us to think, as many metaphysicians have before us, that the end of the age is a couple of things. It's an end of an age in any part of human history that we're graduating, going through, getting to the next end of an age, growing as people to become more like this unified consciousness of God and divinity. It can also be us individually, because we all go through phases and seasons and stages of life where we are learning and growing and unlearning all of the ways we've been conditioned and growing into our next beautiful iteration of self, because we are all on this journey of kind of spiraling into more and more closeness with who we are as divine beings of unconditional love. So knowing that that harvest is something that happens at the end of an age and can happen at the end of every age that we go through kind of sheds a little bit more light for me on this idea of, you know, sorting out the wheat and the tares and what that idea might look like as we move into this next space of Jesus saying, therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of this age. So all of these aspects of us, when we get up to that point where we're growing into our next iteration, our next level of understanding and deepening of unconditional love, what are those things that the angels are going to help us to pull out of our ideas, out of our mindset, out of our bodies, out of our hearts, those pieces that keep us from that full unity with source, with unconditional love? What are those things that are going to be pulled out and burned up in that fire of purification, that fire of transformation? And he says the Son of Man will send out, so the Christ consciousness will send out their angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom, out of that inner space of us, all things that offend and all those who practice lawlessness, all those that offend, those who practice lawlessness. When I see that, I think of practicing injustice, unjustly applying laws or acting without adherence to the universal law that we talk about in the chapel all the time. And we'll cast them into the furnace of fire. And again, I don't think these are talking about people. I think these are talking about all those things that are not Christ consciousness, all those things that are not unconditional love in our lives, and casting those into that fire of transformation. And that last part says, where there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now, I don't know about you, and I know there are some who say that, if we just say yes to the things that inspire us, then our growth can be an ever evolving place of sunshine and rainbows all the time. And I think sometimes that happens. And I think other times, for me personally, growth is not sunshine and rainbows sometimes, because all of those parts of me that are conditioned to not align naturally with who I am as unconditional love, as one with source, don't go quietly sometimes. Sometimes there's a lot of crying and wailing and gnashing of teeth and self-judgment and anger at myself for missing these important pieces for so long, and judging places that I was, and judging and anger at myself for the harm that I'd done in the past, because I was operating from this place of not being where I am now. Of course, we know some of that is helpful in terms of repairing any damage we've done, but also sometimes it's not. So we've got to go through this process and understand that Jesus talked about this 2,000 years ago. This fire of transformation can be very transformative from the perspective of having a lot of tears and sorrow in that process too. But the promise is that on the other side, when we go through that, we're then that much closer to God. We're that much rid of the things that kind of kept us from that full unity before then. And that last part says, the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So that, to me, illuminates that much more of the light that we are here to bear and share with the world, is shining even brighter than it was before. So I have some questions for us to consider as we go forward in this day and this week, thinking about that passage, and thinking about kind of that fire of transformation. And I want to approach it from this idea of past, present, and future, because I think sometimes when I am reading something offhand and I'm reading it, thinking about how things apply to me today, I often forget of how they've applied in the past, and I may or may not have taken stock of it at the time. And if I don't take stock of things when they happen, I might lose the lessons that were there. So before we get into present and future, just take a moment and recall any time in your past, whatever comes to mind first, when you felt like you were on the cusp of a new age or a new beginning or a new iteration of yourself. Just allow yourself to kind of go back to that space. Or maybe it was a time when you didn't realize it until after the fact that you were going through a time of transformation. You were going through the fires of transformation. Maybe you'd opened yourself up and allowed yourself to grow beyond prior conditioning, beyond prior limitations or prior boxes you may or may not have even realized you were existing in at the time, until that fire of transformation burned it away, burned it out from around you, so that you could then see past the box that you didn't realize was there. Think back to one of those times. Were there tears? Was there sorrow? Was there pain? Was there gnashing of teeth, clenching of teeth? Was there anger or frustration with yourself for any past harm you may have done while stuck in that box, unable to see the bigger picture? Was there frustration with others, with people who chose not to walk with you through the transformation, or who couldn't walk with you through the transformation for whatever reason? Or people who wanted to, but just couldn't, and then didn't stay with you on the other side of the transformation. People who, for whatever reason, just couldn't go with you. There may be anger, frustration, sorrow there. And consider the greater experience of wisdom on the other side of that, evidenced by your greater capacity for unconditional love. I think whenever we're growing in wisdom, it must be evidenced by our greater capacity for unconditional love of other people. perhaps a greater capacity to be unconditional love embodied in new ways in your own life, whether with yourself or with people around you, people in your community. So I bring up the past only to say it would make perfect sense that we go through that process that Jesus talked about. Because we are humans living in human society on this third dimensional plane with all of the things that come with that and all of the things happening in our news cycle and our world around us in society. It's very difficult to exist outside of that, right? And I don't think we're here to do that. I think we're here to positively impact it with ourselves being that radiant light of unconditional love in all of those situations. So we've thought a little bit about how it's happened in the past. Let's bring it to the present. What age are you in right now? What period of life are you in? Knowing where you've come from, kind of seeing where you are now, where are you now? If you're going through a transformation, what is that new life or new age you think you're transforming into right now? What's that next level for you, that next beautifully perfect iteration with no judgment of where you are now or where you've come from, just understanding that it's all part of the process? What would that next level of alignment be for you? What are you on the cusp of? And we're going to take it a little farther into the future. What will our next period of transformation include? Once you're beyond this one, if you're in one right now, once you're beyond the today, what will our next period of transformative evolution look like? Individually, as a community, as a chapel, Newport News, as a state, as a country, as a world? What will that look like? When we have transcended this current evolution and we're in our next one, where is it going? What will it look like when we are continually having a greater and greater ability to embody unconditional love and unity in our world, to see each person as an equally divine expression of our common source? What will that expansion look like, fully embodied on our planet in the days and years to come? What will world peace look like? What will it sound like? What will it feel like? What will it smell like when all people are fed and clothed and have housing and clean water and clean air and adequate abundance for all in all areas of life? When we look at all the troubles and the challenges and injustices of today and all that's coming up right now to the surface for that fiery transformation, because it is, it's up to us to remember how this process sometimes works, acknowledging that sometimes we are in that fiery process. And when we're in the throes of those moments where we're feeling that fire, perhaps a good question for us to ask might be, what is that vision of wholeness that's asking to come in right now? What is that other side of this fiery part that's asking to come in, that's asking to emerge once whatever the fire is burning away has fallen away? Because if I can tap into that vision, if I can tap into that vision of unconditional love and wholeness and perfection of that particular thing, going as specific as possible, that particular thing, what is it going to look like in the end? Then I can apply that energy and align with it and let that give me the strength I need to get through this fiery piece that sucks hard right now, right? Because sometimes this is inescapable, sometimes. But if I stand true to the vision, if I remember to ask what we are going toward and apply that to where I am now, I can approach all of this from that reinvigorated energy of unconditional love and greater expansive, inclusive vision for all. And I can start to live from that space today, in this moment. I can start to spend more time in my meditation envisioning what world peace and everyone being fed and having water and housing and shelter and love and respect and dignity for each other. What will that actually feel like? Envision myself there in that process, already done, already complete. Start to construct those scenes of visioning. What am I going to be doing on a Thursday night when all of that is in place with my family and friends around me and we're all laughing and having great conversations? And I know in that moment that all of those things have already come to pass, and I am embodying that unconditional love in a way that has positively impacted self, soul, society, all my communities in such a way that we have collectively brought all of that into the now. What will that feel like? And getting myself into that energetic state and then bringing that back into today, into the today moment, into the now moment, into those moments where the frustration can have its impact on us. Bringing that into the now and allowing that to inform how I step each foot in front of me from where I am right now. Because that's the stuff that's going to change my now moment. That's the stuff that's going to change the way that I interact with the world and the impact that I make and the conversations that I have and the ways that I give myself and my wisdom and my love to society around me. Because we all need that right now. Our society needs all of us right now to be operating from that space. Because if more of us don't start doing that, we're not going to get to that space as quickly as we can. So I invite you to do some journaling or thinking this week about some of the things we've talked about and really allow yourself the gift of writing out and visioning some little scenes and stories about when I'm in that space and this whole world is filled with the unconditional love and it's undeniably evidenced by the very physical manifestations of that. What does that actually look like? What am I going to be doing on a Thursday night or a Sunday morning at noon with my family and friends when world peace is here? And really just let your mind and your vision go wild with that and really just get into the love and the joy of that, and then bring that energy into your day to day or whatever day you're doing it and your moments today as you walk out into the world, and allow that love and that unconditional love and light to infuse every conversation that you have from that moment forward. Leave that with you.